Hi everyone, it's Laura here. It is Sunday night and I am recording this presentation so that it's ready for our meeting on Tuesday. Wow, have we had a crazy couple of weeks here. It's been a little over a month now that we have been in lockdown, and boy, has the world changed during that time. So we're going to talk about the plans and programs that are out there to help you and your businesses with the coronavirus issue. So focusing on our businesses, and this can also be a focus for yourself. The first thing that we had to do was respond to the virus and how we were going to respond to it. We'd never had to do this before, so a lot of us were learning day by day how to respond. But now we're starting to come to the end of it, or the end of this first part of it, and it's going to be time for us to start recovery. So a lot of the new stimulus packages are not only designed to help you respond to the coronavirus epidemic, but also to help you recover from it so that then we can move on to thriving. And that's the goal for all of us. I mean, our economy was screaming before this virus hit us, and we came to a complete stop. So it's going to be time for us to get back on our bikes and thrive again. So let's talk about the different plans that the government has put into place. They've had the CARES Act has been passed, and you're all pretty familiar with talking about the CARES Act, which stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. So in the CARES Act, we have corporate and general business tax provisions. We also have some employer-focused provisions. Then for all of you that are retired and those who have retirement plans available, there are a lot of new rules and regulations regarding retirement plans, compensation, and employee benefits. And then let's not forget, we had several tax benefits for individuals as part of the CARES Act. So let's get right into this. The corporate and general business tax provisions. We had some NOL modifications. That's your net operating losses. So the TCJA Act starting in 2018 had a limitation for net operating loss carrybacks. We now are going to have a repeal of the 80% limitation. This is for corporations, a 5-year carryback, and an unlimited carry forward. That means if a business had any losses in 2018, they can carry those back to 2013 if there was income taxes paid in those years and recoup some of the income taxes. There was also some prior year AMT for corporation modifications. The business interest limitation was modified. It was increased to 50% from 30%. There are some technical amendments regarding qualified improvement property. So if any of you have restaurant property or commercial rental property, this could potentially be advantages for you to go back and amend returns and take advantage of that. With corporations, there are new charitable contribution modifications during 2020. They've increased it to 25% of taxable income, up from 10%. On top of that, there were some changes in the treatment of federal loans, loan guarantees, and other investments. And then we got into some industry-specific federal excise taxes. For instance, there's an alcohol excise tax that they have done an exception for when that alcohol is used in hand sanitizer. And then there was also some aviation excise taxes, which had to do with ticketing. So a couple of changes there. So that's the general idea of what they put into place for the corporate tax provisions. And it's primarily tax provisions on the corporate side until we get into some of the other areas, like employer-focused provisions. So employer-focused provisions are designed to help employers keep their employees and to keep them on payroll so that they're not on unemployment. Um, the the government really wants to have a focus right now of every company maintaining and retaining as many of their employees as possible so that when all the stay-at-home orders are lifted and all these businesses can open again, they are going to be able to have the majority of their workforce still in play with them, still engaged with them. So the first one there is the employee retention credit for employers. So this one was done specifically to maintain head count of employees. And if you're maintaining your head count, there is a credit of 50% of wages up to $10,000. So that means it's a $5,000 credit per employee. And this is for any business that was ordered by the government to shut down or suffered any significant decline in business because of coronavirus. The next item is a delay in deposit of payroll taxes. So if a company had payroll taxes and they incur these at any time up to the end of 2020, there will be no penalties or interest, and they get to delay that as long as they pay 50% of it by the end of 2021 and 50% of it by the end of 2022. Now, this is a huge opportunity for companies. As many of you may be aware, payroll taxes are considered trust fund taxes. And when a company does not pay their payroll taxes, anybody who has signing authority or authority to have executed the payment can be personally liable for the payroll taxes. This is not an area that the government has ever played games with in the past or has ever allowed any types of delay of paying these funds into the government. As a matter of fact, the penalties for failure to pay payroll taxes in on time are really quite severe, 20 to 25% for penalty for a one-day delay in depositing payroll taxes. So on the flip side of this, while this can be a huge advantage to a lot of companies, you really have to be careful with this one because it can create a slippery slope. Like I said, in the past, the penalties have been very extreme on payroll taxes, and the liability, the personal liability to any owner of the business, anyone that controls a checking account, anyone who has any authority to execute payment of payroll taxes can be 100% personally liable. So while this is a big advantage, I also advise anyone using this technique to use it with caution. Then, in addition to that, there was the advanced refunding of credits. This was part of the Families First Act, and you heard about this in the very beginning of the shutdown. And this has to do with the qualified sick leave and qualified family leave wages. So employers are required to provide 2 weeks of qualified sick leave for anyone who has been affected by coronavirus. They themselves have coronavirus, a member of their family has it, they're taking care of someone because someone in the family has coronavirus, or in the family leave area, it's because their children were not able to go to school, so they had to be home with their children, so then the family leave wages came into play. So there's a lot of credits that were designed around this to help families, and so that these families can continue to get their paychecks from the companies that they work for, and then the companies can get these credits on their payroll taxes when they submit the payroll taxes. So if you've got a situation like that, you need to work with your payroll service on how to implement that particular program. Okay, then there were a lot of changes in the retirement plans in compensation and employee benefits. So let's talk first about some of the retirement plans. So you have penalty-free early access to retirement fund plans. So if you're under 59 and a half, you normally can take money from your retirement plans if you pay the penalty for taking that. That penalty is 10% on the federal level. Um, they have waived that for up to $100,000 of distributions from your retirement plans, but you have to have been affected by coronavirus. You have to have had a health or financial hardship because of coronavirus. And then you can take these funds into your income over 3 years, or let's say things recover and you recover financially and you can put that money back into your pension plan for up to 3 years. Normally it's a 60-day rollover. You can take money from your pension plan, but you have to return it within 60 days or it becomes taxable income to you. In this particular case, you can roll it over within 3 years. So you can take the income over 3 years, you can roll it over within 3 years. They also allowed increased limits on loans from retirement plans. Typically, the loan cap has been $50,000. You can now take up to a $100,000 loan from a pension plan or up to 100% of the vested benefits. The loan terms were 5 years. They have increased them to 6 years, the loan repayment terms. For all of you that are retired over 70 and a half and have been taking your required minimum distributions, or for those of you who have inherited IRAs, where the person you inherited from was taking required minimum distributions and you elected to continue their RMDs, your RMDs are suspended for 2020. So any required minimum distribution for 2020 does not have to be taken. They're not going to make you take your money out of the stock market when the stock market's at a low. So this will allow many of the IRAs to recover to the higher rates before you have to take your funds out. Any businesses that have pension plans that they're funding on behalf of the employees, you are getting an extension of your plan funding deadlines. Any company that had, any business that had to pay or had to fund a pension plan in 2020, you now get to delay that funding until January 15th of 21. There was waivers of numerous benefit restrictions within the pension plans. There's a variety of restrictions here. If you've got some issues going on with your benefit restrictions, then reach out to me or reach out to your pension consultant, your third-party administrator, for the rules on those. They're quite extensive and we don't have enough time to talk about them today. In addition, there's an extension so that certain employer payment of student loans can occur. So an employer can pay up to $5,250 of education expenses on behalf of employees on an annual basis. Now, there's quite a few rules for these education assistance programs, like they have to be offered to every single person in the company. You can't offer it to just one person and not offer it to the next person. But if you have an education assistance program and your employees have student loans, those funds can be used to pay student loans up to $5,250 of a student loan, and that is not subject to income taxes. It is excluded from the employee's income taxes. In addition, they also included certain over-the-counter medical products as qualified medical expenses in some of the medical plans, medical benefit plans that are out there. Okay, then we had some tax benefits for individuals, and you all have been hearing about the recovery rebates. The $1,200 per person, $500 for children. There's a lot of news going on the problems with this, and it's going to take a while to sort all of the problems out. I'm surprised they didn't have more problems than they did. It's still rolling out throughout the month of April. Anybody who is on Social Security and SSI that doesn't file a tax return, those rebates are rolling out through the end of April. And then the IRS is going in and trying to do cleanup on all of the other little problems that came up. As you can imagine, with a country our size, there's no one size fits all, and not everyone has the same issues with their taxes. So what they're doing is taking an approach of covering the majority of the people that they can immediately, and then coming back and dealing with exceptions. There's also some modifications on the limitations on charitable contributions during 2020. This actually pans out well for the Escondido Rotary Foundation. I know that all of us have recently given money to the foundation for Coeur de Cuisine. Well, if you were having any limitations in your charitable deductions because of the AGI limitation of 60%, that is gone. You can give up to 100% of your adjusted gross income and be able to take those charitable contribution deductions in 2020. That means you can give away all of your money. Watch out, Mike's out there and he's ready to take deposits for the foundation, and you know, got to watch out for Vaughn. He's going to be out there looking for more donations for CORE. Okay, so then there were modifications on the limits, on the limitation on the losses for taxpayers other than corporations. So any of you that are sole proprietors, partnerships, LLCs, LPs, S corporations, you now have the ability to take any of your net operating losses, any net operating losses that arose, net operating loss that arose in 2018, 2019, and 2020 can go back to the prior 5 years. We are going through all of our clients' returns right now to see if there's anyone who had any kind of suspended losses, limitations on losses, and see where we can take those losses. But this could put money in your pocket today if you are a business that had any losses or an individual that had business losses. So take a look at that if that's your situation. So now they also came out with loans for struggling businesses. You've been hearing a lot about the Paycheck Protection Program. The first round of this program was depleted in 2 weeks, $349 million in 2 weeks. Now the Midwestern states received enough funds to cover 74% of the state's payroll, but California only received enough to cover 24% of payroll costs in California. So there are many governors that are looking at this and going, how did that happen? Well, one of the things that they're looking at is whether they were local and regional banks versus big banks. It has been found that the local and regional banks were able to get the funding in faster because the Paycheck Protection Program was a first come, first served program. So the regional banks and local banks were far more nimble, and they were able to get the programs going much quicker. And then there's also the economic injury disaster loans, and we're referring to these as the EIDL loans. The EIDL loans, you have to apply with the Small Business Administration. Up to $10,000 of the loan may be forgiven. Now, we're not sure if anyone's actually getting this funding. We have not heard of a single case of any one of our clients or any of the businesses that we network with and associate with getting any of this funding. I have been hearing reports that the SBA is overwhelmed with the number of applications, and the SBA was already overwhelmed with the Paycheck Protection Program. So this is one that we're going to have to keep our eyes on and see what happens with this one and if these types of loans are given out. That the $10,000 that may be forgiven, it cannot be used for the same thing as the Paycheck Protection Program. In the Paycheck Protection Program, they can have 2.5 months of payroll. 2.5 months of payroll is how they calculated the amount of the loan that they were giving, and that can be forgiven if it is actually used for payroll, plus 25% of it can be used for other expenses such as rent, mortgage interest, and utilities for contracts that were in place before February 15th. So we're watching these programs very closely. A lot of my clients have already gotten the Paycheck Protection Program. Some of them were right on the edge and didn't get in on the first round. So the good thing is that they are now trying to approve additional funding. It's in Congress right now. The original amount was $349 billion. It's potentially being increased to $600 billion. So we're hoping that the rest of our clients who are already queued up with banks are going to get in as soon as the next round is opened up. The problem is that if you aren't already queued up with a bank, you may have a hard time getting in. And we're also hearing a lot of complaints of people with the large banks don't even know if they're in the queue because they're not getting any feedback from the banks. So it's an issue, it's a problem, and they think that's what our problem is here in California, that there's a lot of larger banks. And so it was not a situation where they were very responsive to the people who put in the applications. Okay, so remember, we're talking about recovery and then thriving. So we need to start getting ready for business to open. In the first 100 days, what are you going to do during your first 100 days? It's time for businesses to put your recovery plan in place, for individuals to plan their recovery budgets. And your back burner, what have you had on your back burner that this is the time, this is an opportunity for you to advance those items? New capabilities, new resources, new opportunities. So I'm going to give you a little exercise that I'm happen to be using with a lot of my cohorts in Strategic Coach, and this is called the back burner breakthrough. First of all, sit down and brainstorm. What kinds of ideas have you had about new capabilities, resources, and opportunities that you had put on the back burner to develop sometime in the future when you had time on your hands? Well, this is the time you have time on your hands. So go back and look at those and look at all of those things you had on the back burner. And then let's move some of them to the front. Take 3 of your back burner improvements that you've decided to implement right away. Then assign your whys and whens. Why is it right away? Why is right now the right time to make these improvements? And set deadlines for these improvements. And then you need to assign your who's. Just because it's your idea does not mean that you have to do it. You do not have to be the who that's doing the how. So look to the other who's. Who are the other people that have unique abilities around the back burner improvement that you want to implement? See how you can stimulate this to go a little faster. This is a tremendous opportunity for everyone right now. I know it's been a hard time, but hard times also open up avenues to good times. And so if you've got some stuff on the back burner, do this exercise and bring some of that stuff up to the front and see what you can do. So if you have any questions, while this is a recording, I will be available for questions on our Zoom meeting after this. And by the way, on my blog, we're constantly posting about the stimulus packages and changes that are going on, things that are happening within it. So go to blog.steeswalker.com and sign up to receive my blog if you're not getting it already. I've had a great time sharing all of this with you guys today. And if you ever have any questions, never hesitate to call me. Thanks for your time.